Throughout history, Black people have faced struggles, oppression, injustice, and barriers that seemed impossible to break. But struggle is not the end of the story. From the pages of the Bible, we see powerful Black leaders who stood firm in faith, overcame adversity, and changed the course of history. These stories are not just ancient history. They are reminders of the strength, resilience, and purpose that live within each of us today. From Simon of Cyrene, who carried the cross of Christ, to the Ethiopian eunuch, one of the first African converts to Christianity, these individuals were not just bystanders. They were chosen, called, and empowered by God to make an impact. Their struggles became their testimony, and their faith became their victory. In this video, we'll uncover the truth about these great Black figures in the Bible and what their journey teaches us about perseverance, faith, and success in the face of hardship. If they could rise above their struggles, so can we. Let's dive in. Simon of Cyrene, Mark 15-21, Luke 23-26. Simon of Cyrene was a man who found himself thrust into one of the most significant moments in history. His name is mentioned briefly in the Gospels, yet his role carries deep symbolism and power. He was an African man from Cyrene, a region in present-day Libya, and he was chosen to carry the cross of Jesus Christ on the way to Golgotha. This single act, though seemingly incidental, speaks volumes about endurance, divine purpose, and the strength of the oppressed. Imagine the scene. Jerusalem is overflowing with people as the Passover festival approaches. The streets are crowded, emotions are running high, and tension fills the air. Roman soldiers parade through the city, enforcing their authority with brute force. In the midst of this, Jesus, battered and weakened from severe scourging, struggles to carry the wooden cross toward the place of execution. His body is broken, his face bloodied, and his steps falter under the crushing weight of the cross. He stumbles, unable to go on. At that moment, the Roman guards scan the crowd and without hesitation seize Simon of Cyrene. He is likely a foreigner, a visitor who had come to celebrate the Passover. He had no part in the trial of Jesus, no role in the mob that demanded his crucifixion. Yet, in the divine orchestration of events, he is pulled from the crowd and placed into this sacred moment of suffering. The burden of the cross, a symbol of sin and redemption, is now on his shoulders. One can only imagine what Simon must have felt in that moment. Confusion, fear, humiliation. The Roman soldiers did not ask, they demanded. Simon had no choice. He was forced into carrying a condemned man's cross, walking through the jeering crowds as blood and sweat stained the wood against his back. And yet, in that moment, he was walking beside Jesus himself. He was sharing in the suffering of the Savior, experiencing firsthand the weight of sacrifice. Simon's story does not end with that walk to Golgotha. Though the Bible does not elaborate on what happened to him afterward, there are strong indications that this moment changed his life forever. The Gospel of Mark refers to Simon as the father of Alexander and Rufus, Mark 15:21, a detail that suggests his sons were known in the early Christian community. Paul also later greets a man named Rufus in Romans 16:13, which many scholars believe could be Simon's son. If this is true, it means that Simon did not merely carry the cross for Jesus, he carried the message of Jesus into his own home, raising his children in the faith. This one moment in time, a seemingly random event, became an eternal testimony. Simon of Cyrene, a Black man from Africa, was given the honor of walking with Christ in his final moments before the crucifixion. This was not an accident, it was divine providence. His story represents the inclusion of all people in God's redemptive plan. The idea that no matter where you come from, no matter what your background is, you have a place in the kingdom of God. For centuries, people of African descent have endured suffering, oppression, and hardship. And yet, just like Simon, they have carried burdens that were never meant to be theirs, forced to endure the weight of systems and struggles beyond their control. But just as Simon's role in the Passion of Christ was not one of mere suffering, but of participation in redemption, so too is the story of Black people one of resilience, faith, and ultimate triumph. Simon's act of carrying the cross is symbolic of the endurance that has been passed down through generations. From slavery to segregation, from civil rights struggles to present-day inequalities, the burden has been heavy, yet the journey has continued. The cross was meant to break Jesus, yet it became the instrument of salvation. Likewise, the hardships faced by Black people have forged strength, perseverance, and an unshakable spirit. The story of Simon of Cyrene reminds us that God chooses the least expected for the greatest roles. A man from Africa, far from home, was pulled into a moment of eternal significance. This was no accident. God saw him, God used him, and God transformed him. Today, his story continues to inspire. It tells us that even when we are burdened, when we are forced to carry loads that seem unbearable, we are walking in divine purpose. Our pain is not in vain. Our struggles are not unnoticed. Just as Simon was linked forever to the greatest sacrifice in human history, so too are we called to carry forward a legacy of faith, endurance, and hope. The cross is heavy, but we do not carry it alone. Jesus, who bore the sins of the world, walks with us. He knows our suffering, he sees our pain, and just as Simon's brief encounter with Christ led to a legacy of faith, so too can our trials become testimonies. We may not choose our struggles, just as Simon did not choose to carry the cross that day, but what we do with them, how we respond, how we carry them forward, can transform generations. Like Simon, we are called not just to bear the weight, but to walk with purpose, to lead with faith, and to leave behind a legacy that will speak long after we are gone. The Ethiopian eunuch, 8 Acts 8:26-40. From the beginning of time, there have been people whose names were written in history, not because they sought power, but because they embraced a divine calling. Among them is the Ethiopian eunuch, a man whose encounter with the gospel changed the course of history for an entire nation. His story, found in the book of Acts, is one of faith, revelation, and transformation. In that reservation, it is a testament to the idea that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace, that no distance is too great for his truth to find those who seek him. The Ethiopian eunuch was a man of high status, a court official serving under Candace, the Queen of Ethiopia. He was in charge of the treasury, a position of great trust and responsibility. Someone who had risen to prominence in a world where few attained such power. Yet despite his status, he was searching for something greater. He had journeyed all the way to Jerusalem to worship, a long and difficult trip that shows his deep spiritual hunger. This was a man who was seeking truth, even when it meant traveling across lands to find it. On his way back to Ethiopia, he was riding in his chariot, reading aloud from the book of Isaiah. He had the scriptures in his hands, but he did not fully understand their meaning. This is where divine intervention stepped in. God sent Philip, one of the apostles, directly to him. Philip was instructed by the Holy Spirit to approach the chariot and engage with the eunuch. As he drew near, he heard the man reading and asked a simple but powerful question. "Do you understand what you are reading?" The eunuch responded with a question of his own. "How can I unless someone guides me?" With that, he invited Philip to sit beside him and explain the scriptures. What followed was a life-changing conversation. The passage the eunuch was reading was from Isaiah 53, a prophecy about the suffering servant, Jesus Christ. Philip, filled with wisdom and revelation, began to preach to him about Jesus, explaining how the prophecies were fulfilled in him. He spoke of the sacrifice, the love, and the redemption that came through Christ's death and resurrection. As they continued along the road, something extraordinary happened. They came upon a body of water, and the eunuch, now understanding the truth of the gospel, asked Philip, "What prevents me from being baptized?" This question was not just about water, it was about transformation. It was about his desire to be fully embraced in the faith he had just discovered. In that moment, Philip baptized him, and as soon as they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord took Philip away, leaving the eunuch filled with joy. This was not just an individual conversion, this was the beginning of something much greater. The Ethiopian eunuch was the first recorded African convert to Christianity, and his faith did not end with him. He took the gospel back to Ethiopia, spreading the message of Christ throughout his homeland. To this day, Ethiopia remains one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, with a rich and unbroken history of faith that can be traced back to this very moment. His journey, his openness, and his willingness to embrace the truth led to a legacy that has endured for generations. The story of the Ethiopian eunuch is a powerful reminder that God's truth reaches beyond borders, beyond status, and beyond circumstances. It does not matter who you are or where you come from. When you seek him, he will find you. The eunuch was a man of wealth and power, yet he still longed for something more. His journey shows us that no amount of success or influence can replace the need for spiritual fulfillment. He had the scriptures in his hands, but he needed someone to guide him. This teaches us the importance of mentorship, of learning from those who have been called to teach and spread the gospel. It also reminds us that baptism is a declaration of faith, a turning point in one's life. The eunuch did not wait. He saw the water and immediately wanted to be baptized. He understood that faith is not about delay, but about taking action. When the truth is revealed, the next step is to embrace it fully. His story speaks to all of us who have ever felt the call to something greater, who have ever searched for meaning beyond what the world offers. Moreover, the Ethiopian eunuch's story represents inclusivity in the kingdom of God. As a eunuch, he would have been seen as an outcast in many religious circles. According to Jewish law, he was considered ritually impure, unable to fully participate in temple worship. Yet here, in the new covenant through Christ, he was not only accepted, but was one of the first to be brought into the faith. This signifies that the gospel is for everyone, regardless of background, social standing, or past experiences. God does not look at the outward condition, but at the heart. He saw the eunuch's sincere desire to understand, and he met him in that place. In many ways, this story is a reflection of the journey that so many Black people have taken throughout history. Despite obstacles, despite barriers placed by society, there has always been a deep pursuit of faith, a hunger for truth, and an unshakable resilience. The Ethiopian eunuch's encounter with Philip mirrors the larger narrative of Black people around the world, overcoming struggles, seeking wisdom, and embracing faith despite the odds. For centuries, African nations have been central to the faith, yet history often overlooks their role in the early church. The conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch stands as a powerful testament that Africa was never outside of God's plan. It was woven into the foundation of Christianity from the very beginning. This challenges the false narratives that have sought to disconnect Black people from their rightful place in biblical history. The truth is, Africa was not just a recipient of Christianity, it was a birthplace of its expansion. The joy that the eunuch felt after his baptism is the same joy that comes from truly encountering God. It is the joy of knowing that you have been seen, that you are loved, and that you have a place in his kingdom. This joy is not dependent on circumstances. It is rooted in the unchanging truth of God's promise. It is the joy that sustained enslaved people who held on to their faith in the darkest of times. It is the joy that empowered civil rights leaders to march forward despite opposition. It is the joy that continues to uplift and strengthen Black communities worldwide. The Ethiopian eunuch's story reminds us that faith is an active journey. He sought truth, he asked questions, he received guidance, and he took action. In the same way, we are called to seek, to learn, and to respond. We are called to carry the message forward, just as he did when he returned to Ethiopia. His life became a living testimony, and we too are meant to be living testimonies of what God can do. As we reflect on his story, let us ask ourselves, are we truly seeking truth, or are we content with surface-level understanding? Are we willing to be guided, to learn from those who have wisdom to share? Are we ready to take action when the moment comes, or do we hesitate out of fear or doubt? The Ethiopian eunuch did not let anything hold him back. He embraced his faith wholeheartedly and, in doing so, became part of something greater than himself. His story is our story. It is a story of searching, of revelation, of transformation, and of legacy. It is a story that reminds us that no matter where we come from, no matter what the world says about us, we are seen, we are called, and we are loved by God. The road ahead may not always be clear, but when we trust in him, he will always send the right guide at the right time. And when that moment comes, may we, like the Ethiopian eunuch, be ready to say, what prevents me from being baptized? Ready to take the next step, ready to embrace the calling, and ready to walk forward in faith. Ebed-Melek, Jeremiah 38:7. Jeremiah 39:15-18. Ebed-Melek was an Ethiopian eunuch and a servant in the court of King Zedekiah of Judah. His story, though brief, is a testament to courage, faith, and divine justice. At a time when Jerusalem was in turmoil and corruption ran deep within the ruling class, Ebed-Melek stood as a beacon of righteousness and compassion. He was not a man of great political power, nor was he among the prophets of Israel, but his actions spoke louder than words. His story is one that deserves to be told, for it reflects the power of standing up for justice in the face of oppression. Jeremiah, the prophet of God, had been speaking against the sins of Judah, warning the people of the coming destruction that would befall them if they did not turn back to God. His words were not welcomed by the leaders of the land, who saw him as a troublemaker rather than a messenger of truth. As a result, he was thrown into a cistern, a deep, empty well with no water but filled with mud. The intention was clear. They wanted Jeremiah to die slowly, out of sight and out of mind, without directly shedding his blood. While many people in the palace remained afraid to challenge the wicked leaders who had condemned Jeremiah, Ebed-Melek did not. He saw injustice and knew he could not stand idly by. He took a great risk by approaching King Zedekiah and pleading for the life of Jeremiah. He spoke boldly, telling the king that what had been done to Jeremiah was evil and unjust. In a time when challenging authority could mean death, Ebed-Melek chose to do what was right rather than what was safe. His courage was met with favor, for God had prepared the way. King Zedekiah listened to him and granted permission for Jeremiah to be rescued. But Ebed-Melek did not rush into action recklessly. He was thoughtful in his approach. He gathered old rags and worn-out clothes and lowered them into the cistern so that Jeremiah could use them as padding under his arms when he was pulled up. This small but significant detail shows the depth of his compassion. He was not just interested in saving Jeremiah's life, but also in ensuring that he did not suffer more than he already had. Ebed-Melek's actions did not go unnoticed by God. While Jerusalem was under siege and destruction was imminent, God sent a personal message to Ebed-Melek through Jeremiah. In Jeremiah 39:15-18, God reassured him that he would be spared from the coming disaster because he had put his trust in the Lord. This promise was profound. While many in Jerusalem would, in his willingness to stand up for truth and justice, had secured him divine protection. This story is a powerful reminder that God sees those who act with courage and integrity. Ebed-Melek was not an Israelite by birth. He was an Ethiopian, an outsider, a eunuch who, in many ways, was considered insignificant in the grand scheme of the kingdom's hierarchy. Yet, in God's eyes, he was a man of great worth. His actions, though small in the eyes of men, carried eternal significance. Ebed-Melek's story resonates deeply with the experiences of Black people throughout history. Time and time again, they have been placed in positions where they had to choose between silent complicity and bold resistance. From the abolitionists who risked their lives to free the enslaved, to the civil rights leaders who faced violence for demanding justice, to the individuals today who continue to stand up against oppression, Ebed-Melek's legacy lives on. His story also serves as a lesson that righteousness is not about nationality, status, or external qualifications. It is about the heart. God did not choose to save Ebed-Melek because of his position in the king's court, nor because of his heritage. He was saved because he trusted in the Lord and acted with justice. This is a message that transcends time, reminding us that God's kingdom is built not on earthly power, but on the faith and actions of those who walk in righteousness. Ebed-Melek teaches us that no act of kindness is too small, and no stand for justice is too insignificant. He did not lead an army. He did not perform miracles. He simply spoke up when no one else would. He acted with wisdom, ensuring that his rescue of Jeremiah was done with care, and for that he was remembered and honored by God. In today's world, there are many opportunities to be like Ebed-Melek. There are people suffering injustices, people who are marginalized, voices that are silenced. The question is, will we stand up for them? Will we risk our comfort, our security, our reputation to do what is right? Ebed-Melek could have remained silent, blending into the background, watching Jeremiah die without lifting a finger. But he chose action. He chose righteousness. and God honored him for it. His story is also a reminder that trusting in God brings protection and reward. In the midst of chaos, when the Babylonian army was tearing down Jerusalem, God's promise to Ebed-Melek stood firm. "I will surely save you because you have put your trust in me," declares the Lord. This promise is not just for Ebed-Melek. It is for anyone who chooses to walk in faith. The world may be full of turmoil, but God sees, God knows, and God rewards those who remain faithful. Ebed-Melek was more than just a servant in the king's court. He was a man of faith, a man of courage, a man whose story continues to inspire those who read it. His name may not be as widely known as those of kings and prophets, but in the eyes of God, his actions were mighty. His story is a call to action for all who hear it. It challenges us to be bold in the face of injustice, to act with wisdom and compassion, and to trust in God's promises, even when the world seems to be falling apart. Through his life, we see that God does not need people of great earthly status to accomplish his will. He uses the willing, the faithful, the courageous. He uses those who are not afraid to step forward when everyone else steps back. Ebed-Melek reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is always an opportunity to do what is right. And when we do, we can rest assured that God sees, God rewards, and God protects. His legacy stands as a testament to what it means to be a true servant of righteousness. He was not seeking recognition. He was not looking for rewards. He simply acted in obedience to what was right. And in doing so, he secured his place in history as a man of faith and honor. As we reflect on his story, let us ask ourselves, when we see injustice, do we speak out or do we remain silent? When we have the opportunity to help, do we take action or do we hesitate? Do we trust in God enough to step forward even when it feels risky? Ebed-Melek's courage changed the fate of a prophet. Our courage too can change lives. May we all strive to be like him, bold, compassionate, and unwavering in our trust in the Lord. The Queen of Sheba, 1 Kings 10:01-13, Matthew 12:42. The Queen of Sheba was a woman of immense wisdom, wealth, and influence, ruling over a prosperous kingdom believed to be in modern-day Ethiopia or Yemen. She was not just a political leader, but a seeker of truth, someone who was not satisfied with hearsay or secondhand knowledge. Her story is one of curiosity, discernment, and divine revelation. It is a story that continues to inspire those who seek wisdom beyond what the world offers, those who understand that true leadership is not just about power, but about understanding and humility. Her journey began when she heard of the fame of King Solomon, a man renowned not only for his wealth, but more importantly, for his wisdom. A wisdom that was said to come directly from God. The Queen of Sheba could have been content ruling her own kingdom, trusting in her own knowledge and power. But she was different. She was driven by an insatiable desire to seek truth for herself. Instead of sending messengers or relying on rumors, she made the arduous journey to Israel, traveling with a great caravan loaded with spices, gold, and precious stones. This was not just a visit of courtesy, it was a mission of discovery. When she arrived, she did not immediately accept Solomon's wisdom at face value. She tested him with difficult questions, riddles, and challenges. She was not a passive listener, but an active participant in the pursuit of truth. This speaks volumes about her character. She was not just a queen in name, but a ruler who valued intellect, who understood that true wisdom must be tested. She engaged in deep discussions with Solomon, challenging him with her thoughts and observations. And to her amazement, Solomon answered every question she posed. She saw firsthand the depth of his understanding, and she was not just impressed, she was transformed. The Bible tells us that when she saw the wisdom of Solomon, the splendor of his palace, the order of his court, the food at his table, the organization of his officials, and even the way his servants were dressed, there was no more spirit in her. She was overwhelmed. This phrase is significant. It means she was not just amazed, but utterly moved. She realized that what she had heard about Solomon's wisdom was not only true, but far greater than what she had imagined. The things she saw were not just about wealth and grandeur. They reflected divine order, wisdom put into practice. She recognized that Solomon's wisdom was not merely human intelligence, but something that came from a higher source. At that moment, she did something profound. She praised God. This was a foreign queen, a ruler from another land, acknowledging the God of Israel. She declared, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, he has made you king, that you may execute justice and righteousness." This was not just admiration for Solomon. This was a revelation of divine truth. She saw that his wisdom was a reflection of God's presence and favor. This was a defining moment in biblical history, where a powerful African queen acknowledged the supremacy of the true God. The Queen of Sheba did not leave empty-handed. She gave Solomon gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones, offerings that reflected her wealth and appreciation. But she also received something far greater in return. Solomon, in turn, gave her everything she desired and much more, beyond what she had brought. This exchange was not just material, it was spiritual. She came seeking wisdom, and she found it. She came with treasures of the earth, but left with treasures of the soul. This is the true mark of a leader. Someone who seeks truth, recognizes it, and embraces it when it is found. Her story does not end in the Old Testament. Jesus himself referenced the Queen of Sheba in the New Testament. In Matthew 12:42, he said, "The Queen of the South will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom, and now something greater than Solomon is here." This is a powerful statement. Jesus was saying that she had the wisdom to seek truth, to travel great distances to find it, and to acknowledge it when she saw it. Yet, in his time, there were those who had the ultimate truth, Jesus himself, standing before them, and they refused to recognize him. This comparison elevates the Queen of Sheba to a place of honor. She is not just an ancient ruler, she is an example for all generations. She represents those who seek God earnestly, who are willing to go beyond their comfort zones to find wisdom, who recognize divine truth when they encounter it. Her story is not just about Solomon's wisdom, it is about the heart of a true seeker. It is about someone who is willing to humble herself despite her power and status in pursuit of something greater. The legacy of the Queen of Sheba continues to have profound significance, especially in African history and culture. She is seen as a symbol of African wisdom, leadership, and divine connection. Many traditions, particularly in Ethiopia, trace their royal lineage back to her, believing that she had a son with Solomon named Menelik, who later became the first emperor of Ethiopia. This connection has shaped Ethiopian Christianity and the historical identity of the region, linking it to biblical prophecy and divine heritage. Beyond historical and religious significance, the Queen of Sheba's story speaks to the essence of true leadership. She was not a queen who ruled by power alone, but by wisdom. She understood the value of seeking knowledge, of testing what she heard, of learning from others. She was open-minded yet discerning, bold yet humble. Her journey was not just about verifying Solomon's reputation, it was about elevating her own understanding. This is a lesson for all leaders, for all seekers of truth. Wisdom is not something we inherit, it is something we pursue. Her story also challenges us to think about how we approach truth in our own lives. Are we willing to seek it out, even when it requires effort? Are we open to learning from others, even those outside our own circles? Do we recognize divine wisdom when we encounter it, or do we let pride and preconceptions get in the way? The Queen of Sheba teaches us that true wisdom requires action. She did not just hear about Solomon, she went to see for herself. She did not just observe, she engaged. She did not just take, she gave. And in return, she received far more than she ever expected. Her legacy is one of strength, wisdom, and divine revelation. She was a queen, a seeker, a woman who recognized God's hand in the world. And because of her willingness to seek and to believe, her story was recorded for generations to come. She stands as a reminder that wisdom is a gift from God, but it is also a choice. We must be willing to pursue it, to test it, to embrace it when we find it. The Queen of Sheba's journey was more than a visit to another king. It was a divine appointment, a moment of transformation, a story of seeking and finding. Her legacy challenges us to be seekers of truth, to go beyond the surface, to ask the hard questions, and to recognize God's wisdom when we see it. In her, we see the power of a ruler who understood that true greatness is not in wealth or power, but in the pursuit of divine understanding. And in that, she continues to inspire generations, standing as a testament to what it means to truly seek and embrace wisdom. Moses' wife, Zipporah, Exodus 2:21, Numbers 12:01. Zipporah was the wife of Moses, a woman of great strength, wisdom, and courage. She was the daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian, a man known for his wisdom and reverence for God. When Moses fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian who was oppressing his people, he found refuge in Midian. It was there that he encountered Zipporah. She was not just a passive figure in his life, but played a crucial role in his journey and his mission to deliver the Israelites from bondage. When Moses arrived in Midian, he met Zipporah at a well, where she and her sisters were drawing water for their father's flock. However, they faced harassment from local shepherds who tried to drive them away. Moses, demonstrating the strong sense of justice that would define his leadership, stood up for them and helped them water their flock. This act of bravery impressed Jethro, who invited Moses into his home. Eventually, Moses married Zipporah, and she bore him 2 sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Zipporah's influence in Moses' life was profound. She was not merely a wife in the background, but a woman who took decisive action when it mattered most. One of the most striking moments in her story occurs in Exodus 4:24-26. As Moses was on his way back to Egypt to fulfill God's command of leading the Israelites out of slavery, the Lord confronted him and sought to put him to death. This mysterious and dramatic incident is often debated among scholars, but what is clear is that Zipporah understood the gravity of the situation and acted swiftly. She took a sharp stone and circumcised their son, touching Moses' feet with the foreskin and saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." Immediately God relented and Moses' life was spared. This moment is profound because it highlights Zipporah's spiritual discernment and her ability to act decisively in a crisis. She understood that Moses had failed to circumcise their son, which was a crucial covenant sign between God and Abraham's descendants. By stepping in and performing the circumcision herself, she not only saved Moses, but also ensured that their household was in alignment with God's covenant. Her quick thinking and deep understanding of spiritual matters underscore her importance in Moses' life and mission. Zipporah's strength is also evident in the way she managed their family. While Moses was deeply engaged in leading the Israelites, she was not always by his side physically. At one point, Moses sent her and their sons back to Jethro for safety. This separation, however, did not diminish her importance. Later, Jethro brought her and their children back to reunite with Moses, signifying the importance of family even in the midst of a divine mission. Zipporah's identity as a Midianite also plays a significant role in the biblical narrative. Her presence in Moses' life challenges the notion that God's plans are limited to one nation or one group of people. She was not an Israelite, yet she was instrumental in the life of the man chosen to lead God's people to freedom. This reflects a recurring theme in the Bible, that God works through people of all backgrounds to fulfill his divine purposes. One of the most notable incidents involving Zipporah indirectly is found in Numbers 12, where Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of his Cushite wife. The term Cushite is often interpreted to mean an Ethiopian woman, leading to the belief that Moses may have had another wife, or that this referred to Zipporah's darker complexion. Regardless of the interpretation, what stands out is that this complaint led to divine intervention. God rebuked Miriam and Aaron for speaking against Moses, affirming his unique relationship with him. Miriam was struck with leprosy as a result of her criticism, highlighting the seriousness of her actions. This incident shows that Zipporah, whether directly or indirectly, was at the center of a conflict that ultimately reaffirmed Moses' divine calling. Zipporah's legacy is one of quiet but powerful influence. She was a woman who understood the weight of divine responsibility and acted when needed. She was a protector, stepping in to save Moses when his life was in danger. She was a mother who ensured the continuity of the covenant through her children. She was an outsider who played a crucial role in the story of Israel's greatest leader. Her story carries important lessons for all who seek to walk in faith. She demonstrates the importance of discernment, showing that spiritual insight can sometimes mean the difference between life and death. She embodies the strength of a supportive partner, proving that behind many great leaders are those who provide wisdom and action in critical moments. She also challenges any notion of exclusivity in God's plans, showing that He calls people from all backgrounds to fulfill His purposes. Her story also speaks to the role of women in biblical history. Often the focus is placed on male figures like Moses, yet women like Zipporah were instrumental in shaping the course of events. She was not a prophet like her husband, but her actions had prophetic significance. She was not a military leader, but she played a role in ensuring the success of the greatest exodus in history. Her faith, courage, and wisdom set an example for generations to come. Zipporah's relationship with Moses was also one of balance. She was not merely a follower of his journey, she was an active participant. The incident at the well showed her as a woman who was not afraid to work and stand her ground. The circumcision event revealed her as someone who could take charge in a crisis. Even in moments of separation, her presence was felt, and her role remained vital. In many ways, her story mirrors the struggles and triumphs of Black women throughout history, often overlooked, yet undeniably essential. Often facing resistance, yet standing firm in wisdom and faith. Zipporah's journey reflects the power of standing in one's purpose, even when the world does not always acknowledge it. She represents the strength, intelligence, and courage that so many Black women have exhibited throughout history, making an impact not just in their families, but in the destiny of entire nations. Her story is a reminder that divine purpose does not always come with public recognition. Some of the most powerful acts of faith happen in private moments, decisions made in the home, actions taken out of love and responsibility. Zipporah was not on the mountain when Moses received the 10 Commandments, nor was she performing miracles before Pharaoh. But without her, Moses' journey might have ended before it truly began. Without her, the covenant sign might have been neglected. Without her, one of the greatest leaders in history would not have had the support he needed. Her legacy is one of quiet strength, profound wisdom, and unwavering faith. She stands as a testament to the fact that God sees and honors those who act in faith, even when their names are not always in the spotlight. Zipporah teaches us that leadership is not just about public acts, but also about the unseen moments of courage and obedience. As we reflect on her life, we are reminded that God uses people of all backgrounds, that faith requires action, and that true strength often comes in moments of crisis. Zipporah's story, though brief, carries immense power, echoing through generations as a call to wisdom, courage, and unwavering trust in God's plan. Her children. She was an outsider who played a crucial role in the story of Israel's greatest leader. Her story carries important lessons for all who seek to walk in faith. She demonstrates the importance of discernment, showing that spiritual insight can sometimes mean the difference between life and death. She embodies the strength of a supportive partner, proving that behind many great leaders are those who provide wisdom and action in critical moments. She also challenges any notion of exclusivity in God's plans, showing that He calls people from all backgrounds to fulfill His purposes. Her story also speaks to the role of women in biblical history. Often the focus is placed on male figures like Moses, yet women like Zipporah were instrumental in shaping the course of events. She was not a prophet like her husband, but her actions had prophetic significance. She was not a military leader, but she played a role in ensuring the success of the greatest exodus in history. Her faith, courage, and wisdom set an example for generations to come. Zipporah's relationship with Moses was also one of balance. She was not merely a follower of his journey, she was an active participant. The incident at the well showed her as a woman who was not afraid to work and stand her ground. The circumcision event revealed her as someone who could take charge in a crisis. Even in moments of separation, her presence was felt, and her role remained vital. In many ways, her story mirrors the struggles and triumphs of Black women throughout history, often overlooked, yet undeniably essential. Often facing resistance, yet standing firm in wisdom and faith. Zipporah's journey reflects the power of standing in one's purpose, even when the world does not always acknowledge it. She represents the strength, intelligence, and courage that so many black women have exhibited throughout history, making an impact not just in their families, but in the destiny of entire nations. Her story is a reminder that divine purpose does not always come with public recognition. Some of the most powerful acts of faith happen in private moments. Decisions made in the home, actions taken out of love and responsibility. Zipporah was not on the mountain when Moses received the 10 Commandments, nor was she performing miracles before Pharaoh. But without her, Moses' journey might have ended before it truly began. Without her, the covenant sign might have been neglected. Without her, one of the greatest leaders in history would not have had the support he needed. Her legacy is one of quiet strength, profound wisdom, and unwavering faith. She stands as a testament to the fact that God sees and honors those who act in faith, even when their names are not always in the spotlight. Zipporah teaches us that leadership is not just about public acts, but also about the unseen moments of courage and obedience. As we reflect on her life, we are reminded that God uses people of all backgrounds, that faith requires action, and that true strength often comes in moments of crisis. Zipporah's story, though brief, carries immense power, echoing through generations as a call to wisdom, courage, and unwavering trust in God's plan.